Welcome to another episode of the Colorful Kid Podcast. This week we have my boy Tom Harrison joins us from the Cambio de Juego newsletter and the podcast. We're here to chat some young Mexican players in Liga MX. Tom, it's been a long time. How the hell are you?
It's been a long time. Yeah, I'm good. How you doing? It's great to get together and have a little chat about Mexican football again.
And if anyone has not subscribed to his newsletter, you should. You have a lot of interesting articles, insights, stuff you won't hear on Football Picante every day.
That's the idea, at least.
You had a lot of several nice pieces about the young players in Liga MX, kind of like the players that maybe are just about to break out or in the middle of, I guess, essentially just breaking out and kind of getting to the first team. And we all know it's a struggle in Liga MX to establish yourself in the Liga MX. So I'm just gonna name a couple names here and tell me what you think about the season they had, especially these first couple guys we'll talk about are the guys you wrote about, and it might have been like your second newsletter this season. It'd be nice to kind of look back to see if they met your expectations or maybe you were wrong about them breaking out. First, Alan Bautista, 900 minutes over the Apertura and Clausura, 1 goal, 1 assist.
Yeah, I think Bautista's a really interesting guy. Just because when I read this article looking really at how he played in Apertura, you could see that he perhaps wasn't like the most standout player in terms of like he's really good at all these different things, but he was having a really good impact actually in attack. So he was pretty good at getting into some good positions to shoot from, creating a few chances as well. I think the challenge for him is in his positioning when he has played. So what kind of killed him was the arrival of Kennedy in Pachuca, who obviously has been really good, scoring 9 goals in the Clausura. But I think that's his position primarily. Like that would be his position as a number 10, and he's had to play a lot deeper, more of a deeper midfielder to get games. I think he's done okay. We know Alvarez always going to give opportunities to young guys who are going to have the attitude to run and to press all game long. And I think he has a good attitude to help out defensively. And he's someone who maybe could get lost, but if he finds the right role for him in the future, then I think he could be a decent Liga MX level player. Maybe not someone who we're thinking like, oh, he's going to go on to Europe. Though.
In terms of national team profile, is he someone you can see maybe later on developing into someone that he joins a national team pool? Or is he kind of just going to be one of those players that's a really good Liga MX player, maybe, but maybe not the profile of he's going to get a lot of caps with the national team?
Probably not too many. Maybe I wouldn't be surprised if he had a moment where maybe he has like a bit more of a standout season where he gets a good number of like goals and assists because he is that player who does get himself into good positions. Like most of his shots coming off from more in and around the box. Kind of I guess he's kind of a little bit of a new Victor Guzman in that sense of someone who maybe doesn't seem like the most spectacular player, but actually can have a big impact in the final third, but often actually gets that taken away from him by having to play a little bit too deep on the pitch. I think he could definitely improve as a passer, like his decisions, his technique, and in terms of passing, and that tends to come if he has a little bit more experience. So he might be a little bit more of a late bloomer.
And we all know how much Victor Guzman plays for the national team. He's one of those players that's a club level player who just doesn't really, I don't know if it's the coaching, the play styles. He just hasn't really become a fixture. I mean, he's a really good Liga MX player, Victor Guzman, but he just never broke through with the national team.
Yeah, I mean, he was a good Liga MX player. I'm not sure he's
Oh,
that good anymore, to be honest. But levels dropped a little bit. But yeah, I think it's tough for those kind of. It's always going to be tough for someone who's like an attacking midfielder to be able to be like, okay, I'm deserving of like a number 10 spot in the national team. I mean, you've got to be really good. You've got to be playing like in Europe. Like, I mean, even someone like Orbelin has been over in Europe for a few years now, and even he struggles to get consistent minutes for the national team.
it's like people always say it's a dying position in soccer, and I think you're right. You kind of need like a player like James Rodriguez to command the respect to be like, okay, you're going to be the number 10. And you kind of have to build your team around the number 10 to a certain extent. Because I mean, I'm sure Bautista has a higher motor than James Rodriguez, but those guys aren't you kind of have to cater to them in your tactics, don't you? And carrying a number 10 on your squad.
Yeah, yeah. If it is that type of player, I think the good thing about Batista is he could be seen more as someone who can actually help out defensively, right? He's not lazy. I mean, he is young though, right? Obviously, you kind of expect younger players to have more physical capacity, more energy, more of that mentality to want to make an impression and keep their place in the team by doing the defensive work, especially if you're playing under a coach like Almada, who's not going to take lazy players. Yeah, I wouldn't say he's a luxury number 10 in that sense, but it still takes someone to be like, okay, we're gonna play in this system where we're actually fitting this player in, and we're going to rely on them to have enough of an impact, enough of an output. Pretty much what Kennedy has done for Pachuca this season, right? By scoring 9 goals from being the number 10. And if they're not quite hitting those numbers, it's very easy for players to get dropped, right? It's very easy for them to, you don't score again the system in a few games. It's very easy for them to drop to the bench.
Up next, Isaias Violante from Toluca, 1,400 minutes, 6 goals, 4 assists. How good is he versus how lucky he was to be on that Toluca team? Was just their offensive attack was number 1 this year, just kind of they scored more goals than, every team in Liga MX, I think by 5 goals.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think Brillante's really good. He's someone I've watched for quite a while. I remember him playing in U20 games, and he was so difficult to stop because what's interesting about him is his physical profile because he's incredibly quick, like really quick player, fantastic change of pace. But he's also quite tall. So physically, he's very difficult to contain, right? To stop, to get the ball off him. I think he's kind of an interesting case in the sense that I'm not sure he really would have played if it wasn't for the youth minute rule.
So you're saying the youth minute rule works?
I think there's some decent arguments that it is, at least at the moment, not better than not having it, for sure.
And do you a lot of people will quickly just scoff at the rule and say, it's just giving these guys a chance. It's not like the number is that high because it's also it scales down, right? It's like from 21 to 20 to 19. So if a player's under 19, the minutes quote unquote count more than like if he was 21, right?
You get a certain percentage basically. So I think the lowest is you get 20% of their minutes count, and then it's goes like scales up from there.
I think there's also a limit to how many of those minutes you can earn in one game because
Absolutely, yeah. I
When
think
Club
it's
America had
200 and something. I can't remember
I think
exactly.
it's I think it might be 270 because I think when Club America
270.
started off the year with basically the U23 squad for the first month, they were capping out at like
Exactly.
270 minutes every game. So it's not like the rule is that hard where oh, I have to play this player. It's scale. So if you got a guy who's 23, like you said, I think you get 20% of the minutes that count for him at that point.
Yeah, it's done on the birth year rather than the specific age at the time. It's done whether they're like born in 2002, 2003, 2004, etc. So yeah, I think you have a fair point that it's not the hardest to make, but there are certain teams that you look at like Toluca, and some teams have good young players, right, who are going to play regardless of whatever rule there is. Like, Chivas, Pachuca, like they have young players who are automatically going to start because they are the best players they have. But yeah, there are certain teams. I think Toluca is one that I'm not sure they'd give. Oh, they would barely give any minutes to any young players if they had the choice. I don't think. I mean, last season, Renato Paiva spoke out about the rule specifically. I mean, Mohamed hasn't said anything, but sometimes it feels like they've been just trying to find ways to complete the minutes. So Violante, for example, has played a lot of time at left back, and this is a goal scoring winger. Like, he is a super quick, get in behind defenses, get shots off type of winger. He's not a stay wide and cross the ball into the box kind of winger. So he's not someone who I'd think, oh yeah, he could adapt to being a left back. But that's often where he's played, and I think it's literally just like, how can we fit this young guy in who is good enough to play to get the minutes? The positive side of that is we can actually watch him, right? Like, at the end of the day, nothing is going to convince coaches and directors in terms of how good a player is than what they're doing on the pitch in Liga MX football. So by him having, those amount of minutes, like, there's stuff we can analyze and stuff we can say with confidence. Okay, actually, this guy is good enough to play. You know, maybe not actually yet to be a starter in the best attacking team in the league like Toluca, but at a lot of clubs, he could definitely be starting for like half the league at least. I reckon he could be an improvement on some of the players they have.
It's always easier to play I feel like it's always easier to play, like, left back when your team's so good and they're gonna possess the ball. How much defending are you really doing?
Yeah, no, exactly that, exactly that. And often it's an easier position to play just because of um, the way that you're positioned next to the flank. Like if you're playing in the center of the pitch, one of the hardest things is that you have to be aware of everything that's around you at all times. You constantly have to be scanning like all around you 360 degrees. You never know where pressure's coming from, like where the best passing decisions are. If you're on the wing, you only have to worry about 180 degrees of the pitch most of the time. So you can easily position yourself where you can see what's coming, you can see the options. So it does make it a lot easier. I mean, I have, looked at some things of the past, and I don't think it's any surprise when I've done some research on like which positions are most common to develop from Fuerzas Básicas to Liga MX players, and it is fullbacks, particularly attacking fullbacks are the ones that are most likely to make it as a professional.
As we all know, most attacking fullbacks are just failed wingers, right?
A lot of them, yeah, absolutely. A lot of them in the under 14s, under 16s, like they're playing as wingers, and then they get moved to playing fullback again. Often just for necessity, right? Because that's the only way that they can get a chance in the first team. I mean, now it's happening a little bit more with midfielders like Trent Alexander-Arnold, Liverpool, maybe joining Madrid is a really good example of a guy who was like centre midfielder his whole time as an academy player, and then he wasn't going to get in midfield in the first team, but there was a space at right back, and he became a right back who's maybe defensively has a few weaknesses, but he's the best passing right back in the world.
And now he's gonna play for Madrid
Looks like it, yeah.
on a free transfer.
Well,
No
free,
transfer fee,
free,
no
so to
transfer fee.
speak. Liverpool don't make any money.
Yeah,
Someone's making money.
that agent is making that money.
Exactly.
And in terms of profile on the national team, do you see him being an option? I mean, I probably the World Cup is probably too soon, but do you see him as a player who could surprise us and maybe make the Gold Cup roster?
I don't think, yeah, I don't see him being someone national team right now. I think he's going to have kind of a breakout season. And yeah, the challenge is like, is that going to be at Toluca? You know, I don't think he's going to get potentially enough game time at Toluca right now. So, but yeah, is there the opportunity to go somewhere else?
And just to kind of reiterate that point, he's got 12 appearances this Clausura, but only 420 minutes.
Yeah,
So he's not even seeing 40 minutes per appearance, which he's a super
a lot of sub appearances, a lot of like we're winning. Like, let's get some youth minutes sorted.
yeah. And just to go along with the those I think there were some clubs that I've seen it done in other seasons or other times where they'll start a player to get those youth minutes in, and they'll take him off at halftime. I've seen a lot in like the last jornada where they're like, "Oh crap, we gotta get these youth minutes in."
Being taken up at a weirdly specific time, like
Yeah,
the 48th minute.
it's classic Liga MX.
It is, and I mean, obviously, that is the problem with the rule, right? But you know, is that better than guys just not being played at all? I mean, this is the trouble. Like, where do these guys go for minutes, or where do these young players go for minutes? You've got a second division that's tiny in terms, like, not a huge number of teams, and isn't a great level anyway. So it's very tough for young players to get professional minutes.
Liga MX suffers from that hole from the U20 to 23. It's like those players are just like you're saying, they don't get as many opportunities, and second division isn't what it used to be. So it's like that's why I'm a big fan of the rule. You're not. It's good. It's in the team's best interest to develop young players, even if it's coming off the bench. And it's not like it's a lot. It's not like it's an insurmountable amount of minutes.
I think this is something that it's interesting coming from my perspective from England and seeing how that attitude's changed in the last few years towards the development of young players and giving young players minutes. And obviously England's national team has gotten a lot better in the last few years in terms of the talent available. A lot of that's to do with obviously the money in the country, right? The money in the Premier League and how much has been invested in these academies. But also there's now teams are looking at young players as financial assets, right? Which maybe sometimes feels a little bit like it's stripping away from kind of the I guess the romance of football, or that aspect of seeing them, as actually he's a homegrown talent who the fans love and everything, who could be a legend for the club. But now it's kind of shifted to where teams are seeing these young players coming through as well. If we can increase their value by getting them on the pitch, by either getting them a good loan or actually giving them a decent amount of minutes, then we can sell them for like 10, 15, 20 million pounds. And that money is then being used obviously to buy other players, right? And I
Pure
think
profit, according to PS.
if we're talking PSR rules, which is the rules they have that tries to limit spending in the Premier League, then yeah, exactly, those players are pure profits. If you sell someone for 20 million, then you have 20 million to invest in a new player, and then if you buy a new player on a 5-year contract, the money gets spread out. So basically, you could sell a player for 20 million and then buy a player for 100 million on a 5-year contract, and it works out on the books as the same, right? You haven't lost anything. So it's something that a lot of Premier League clubs are doing, and a lot of people don't like it because it's leading to clubs like selling some of their homegrown talents that the fans, are connected with. But the positive aspect of this is it's incentivizing clubs to give young players minutes so that they can increase their values, or it's incentivizing them to sell them on. Whereas rather than like we've seen in Liga MX, right, a young talented player gets just put on a really long contract and they're just held in the club forever and ever and ever, and they barely get on the pitch, but they don't want to be sold because the club doesn't want to see this player be successful for another team or whatever reason it is, right? And in England, that's not happening. Now they're like, we need to get rid of this player because we need to sell them for the profit so that we can buy someone else for the first team right now. So they go and play for a team who wants them. They go and get first team minutes. And it's like, you mentioned the America example, right? Like how many, those, okay, it was 2 games, right? But those U23s for America showed that they're pretty good, right? I mean, they got 4 points from 2 games that they played, comfortably beat Querétaro, should have beat Cholos. Okay, not the strongest opponents, but also still Liga MX opponents. You look at that and think, well, how many of those guys should be playing for Querétaro? Like, if they've just beaten Querétaro, shouldn't they be playing for Querétaro rather than, some of the like older past it players that Querétaro have in their squad? But there isn't that incentive for America to go, you know what, like, we're going to let all these guys go and play, or actually we're going to sell them, because if we sell these players, we can make money to then reinvest in it in the first team squad, because there's no need to do that. So I think that's a bit of a rambling thing to go on about, but
No, well,
I think it's
it's
really interesting what's happened in England in recent years, and
because it used to be
not
the opposite.
necessarily by design. It's been really good for development of young players.
I think it used to be the opposite in England because, because as many football manager players know out there, there's a requirement to have X amount of homegrown players in the squad, and that led to certain English players being overvalued because they would count in that limit. So certain clubs literally kept players on and didn't sell them because, like, well, I can't sell this guy because I need a quote unquote homegrown to fill one of my 5 slots or 6 slots. And like, I remember, I think it was Man City's backup goalkeeper. They had him for like 6, 7 years. Dude never played, but he counted as a homegrown player to fill one of those slots. So they just kept re-signing him. It was the third keeper. I forget his name, but you know
I
what I'm saying?
think that was that Scott Carson? I think that was
Yes.
Scott Carson.
Yeah. They would just
Yeah,
keep he's happy to make the money, but also, like, Man City's like, "Well, most of our players are foreign. We gotta balance this out, so let's keep
exactly,
re-signing this keeper." But now, like
exactly.
I said, now it's flipped. Now it's like, "Hey, let's sell this 20-year-old for 10, $15 million. Pure profit. We can use that to sign another player."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, I think that still happens with third choice goalkeepers. I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
like
It's always
older
an English guy.
guys, always an older English guy who's probably a good guy around the training ground and everything, and
What did
never
Man U have?
plays.
Tom Heaton? They have Tom Heaton for, like, a decade. He never really played, but he was, like, always on the squad, always
Always on the
registered.
squad. Yeah,
Moving on to another player you highlighted in your newsletter, Elias Montiel. Is he the real deal? I keep hearing a lot about him.
absolutely.
Real quick, 2,200 minutes this season, 2 goals, 2 assists as a 19-year-old this season.
I think there's a couple of guys who we could pick out as the most standout young Mexican players right now. the other one is 2 or 3 years younger than Montiel, so maybe wins it for his age. Yeah, Montiel is a really, really special talent. And yeah, what the name of the article was is why Montiel is a unique talent in Mexican football. Because it's very rare that you see midfielders like him come through. I mean, first of all, obviously, it's very rare that you see teenagers getting that number of minutes, and it's not like this was a breakout season for Montiel. Like he's already played a good amount of minutes even before coming into this season. But the key thing that stands out for him is his passing ability. So it's really rare to see young midfielders anywhere in the world, to be honest, that instantly come through and are really important in a team's like build up play, because so much of that stuff is about intelligence, it's about reading of the game, and it's about vision and decision making, and all those are the sorts of things that tend to develop as players get older, right? Players tend to physically decline, but their game intelligence tends to get better. And this is why I think I put this in the article as well. Why a lot of the oldest, like the best old players, apart from goalkeepers, have been like defensive passing midfielders. You think of like Pirlo, you think of Toni Kroos and Luka Modric.
Guardado.
Guardado, yeah, exactly. Who reinvented himself, right? He's a perfect example. Someone who physically declined, couldn't play as a winger anymore, moved into midfield, and has prolonged his career by being, someone who's an excellent passer. So that's not common. It's not common to see a young player who, one of the really simple metrics that you can look at, like data points you can use, is just how many touches a game they're getting. And something that you see normally is that young midfielders, when they play, don't have very many touches compared to other midfielders. Like they're normally pretty low for the amount of times they're getting on the ball. And Montiel's just the opposite. Like he is kind of the heart of that Pachuca team, how they build attacks, getting loads of touches on the ball. He is excellent at not just maintaining the ball, but moving the ball forward. So, in the article I put about his progressive passes, which is passes that aren't just going sideways, they're actually moving the ball up the pitch. And compared to every other U22 Mexican within the last 5-6 years, he is way better at making progressive passes than any of them. So he is, like I said, a unique talent, and I definitely think the real deal.
Should I get my hopes up that some club is going to see him at the Club World Cup and say, you know what, let's splash a mid seven figure fee for him? Is it
He's already impressed.
Is Pachuca going to hold on to him and try to get 8 figures for him?
They might want a lot, but this guy's already impressed at, well, it's not called the Club World Cup anymore. Was it the Intercontinental Cup?
Yeah, yeah.
He
And he won
was he
the
won
player
the
of the match, right?
ball.
Oh, bronze ball. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, third best player in the tournament. So that's pretty good. I think it's a good stage for him to impress. Definitely. One thing is obviously scouts from all over the world right now. There's no secret hidden talents that people can find. Like everyone's watching everyone all the time and keeping track of players. And if anyone's seeing a 19-year-old midfielder in Mexico getting loads of minutes, considering the rarity, like how rare that is, they're going to be taking note of him. So he's already going to be on a lot of teams' lists. But if he can perform, like if he has a good game against some of those teams in the Club World Cup, then that's maybe going to give some teams a little bit more confidence of, okay, like he can do it on a different stage, not just in the Liga MX context.
Yeah, I'm getting excited. Pachuca's playing RB Salzburg in the game one. In game two, they're playing Real Madrid.
There you go. Real Madrid again, right? I mean, that's who they played in the
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then they're
Intercontinental
playing
Cup.
the Saudi club in game three.
Which Saudi club is that?
Al Hilal.
Okay, Al Hilal are really good. Like that's probably the toughest group I've seen actually, because Al Hilal's they're the best team in Saudi Arabia, and considering there's a 10-day transfer window before this tournament starts, I wouldn't be surprised if they went and bought one or two players going into it.
I am very curious to see what this 10-day window is going to be like. I feel like it just seems weird. It's a 10-day window. Like I don't. If you're really competing in the Club World Cup, is the solution to bring in a player 2 weeks before the tournament starts?
Yeah, I think FIFA are desperate to, obviously they're desperate to make this a success, right? And I
Yeah.
think one of the keys to that is they want teams from all over the world to compete with Europe, right? They don't want it to just be European teams walk all over everyone else and it's not a very
Every
interesting
version of this
tournament.
tournament before.
Yeah, exactly. And it just turns into like Champions League semi-finals or something like that. I think they want that global interest, and therefore those 10 days really is an opportunity for the clubs from different countries to strengthen. Again, as you say, whether it'll work, like throwing in a bunch of new players just before a tournament starts and trying to get them to understand how to play together and everything, is that a good idea compared to sticking with the guys who've played all season? I'm not sure. But I mean, I've even heard, for example, with the African teams, like the African Federation is going to give, I think it's $2 million to each team so that they can strengthen their squads going into the tournament. I wouldn't be surprised if within Liga MX there's some sort of like, I don't know if there could be some loans going on from one club to another, but a lot of
Well, it
countries are
might
going
be
to be
some
desperate for
loans.
their teams to impress.
There might be some loans from Leon to Pachuca.
Well, that's one in particular. We
I mean, if I'm James Rodriguez and Andres Guardado, I'm a little pissed off that I signed with Leon with the with the with the goal of, hey, in the summer we're playing the Club World Cup. So much that they it got Guardado out of retirement,
Yep.
and now, JK guys, you're not gonna play. That is brutal.
Absolutely. That's going to be one to watch. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Elias Montiel, in terms of national team profile, is he? Obviously, he can't go to the Gold Cup this year because he's going to be in the Club World Cup. But is that someone you think could join the player pool before the World Cup? Because Mexico needs someone in the middle, man. We need someone at number 8, someone. Because if I happen to see Edson Alvarez try to his best Rafa Marquez impersonation, try to ping the ball over the field, it's going to be rough.
Yeah, midfield's probably, I think, perhaps the sort of position of the pitch that could change most with the national team and going into the World Cup because we like that was the position where they changed between the semi-finals and the finals of the Nations League, and obviously you've got guys who've been there for years, like Charlie, like Romo, Edson, who's I mean obviously going to play. You've got Eric Lira, who's come into the side recently, and then guys like Eric Sanchez and Marcel Ruiz, who've been outstanding in the league, not getting into the squad. So I think there's still some movement to happen in that midfield. I wouldn't bet on Montiel making it, to be honest, but who knows? Like we're still a year out. I mean, the question is, if he did move to Europe, right, and he's playing in Europe, does he then instantly become like, oh, okay, he has to play?
I mean, I'm not saying he has to play, but I'm just saying, like, will he get called up to the 25-man roster? I don't think he's going to be starting game 1 at Azteca next year. But
Mhm.
the what would you say is his best position? A number 6 or number 8?
I think he's best as an eight. Like I think if you have someone who's a little bit more defensive behind him,
Like Edson
I think that's
Alvarez?
his best. Yeah, I think he works alongside Edson.
And that's what Mexico needs, a number 8, a true number. I mean, I feel like Romo is a stopgap. I like Luis Chavez, especially dead ball situations, but you need more midfielders just from a standpoint of, hey, we're going to play 3 games in 8 days, in the World Cup.
We've
You
got a
need
lot of
bodies.
competition for that place. Like I said, like obviously Charlie's in the conversation. You've got Eric Sanchez, who's you know been much better for America this season. His first season he struggled, but he's been much better. Marcel Ruiz, who's been outstanding for Toluca for years now and
He needs to be
consistently
called up.
gets
Marcel
ignored.
Andres needs to get called up this summer. If he doesn't get called this summer, I don't know.
Me neither.
I
Like,
just don't know,
yeah,
man.
yeah, he should be playing Gold Cup.
Chivas, we can kind of lump these guys into one a little bit. Hugo Camberos, 1,000 minutes, 1 goal, 1 assist. And then Mateo Chavez, 2,100 minutes, no goals, 4 assists. And doing research for the pod, number 2 in tackles won this year. Didn't think that was going to be a thing, but Mateo Chavez second in tackles, and each player with their own transfer rumors. Mateo Chavez allegedly going to AZ Alkmaar, with Chivas keeping 30% of his rights. And then the story for Camberos is that he refused a contract renewal, and PSV is interested. What are your thoughts on these two? Let's start with Camberos, 18 years old. What are your thoughts on him?
I mean, Camberos, well, with both of these players, but actually, yeah, with both, they were outstanding in the expansion. So, we mentioned that there aren't quite as many opportunities for young players in recent seasons in the second division, and there's questions about the level of the second division given the lack of promotion. But some of those guys who've gone to Tapatio, which I think is one of the things in Chivas that has worked really well recently, like that pathway that they've created of players going into Tapatio, playing a season or two there, and then stepping up to the first team, has been really effective. Yeah, I mean, Camberos last season was like the best winger attacking midfielder in the league at 17 years old, which is still very, even as a second division, that's still very impressive.
He just turned 18 3 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, that from that aspect, like he again is someone unique. We don't get many of these guys coming through. Credit to, I was surprised that he played so much at the start of the season. And credit to Oscar Garcia for giving him game time. As I put in my article when I did a little look at him, I think he was kind of a little bit used for Garcia to make his tactical adjustments, because basically every game he was getting used in a different position or a different role, which makes sense that you've got this kid who you can, like, they're there wanting to impress. You know that they haven't got so much of their game isn't so ingrained in them, right? They're more malleable. They're more able to adapt to different situations. And I think he used him in that way to some success. The flip side of that argument is maybe sometimes it didn't get the best out of Camberos. Maybe sometimes like it's a bit much to be asked, like, okay, now you're going to go on the left wing. Next week, you're right wing. This time you've got to get back and play like a wing back and make a back five and cover defensively the whole game. Next game, I want you to play basically next to the striker, like moving inside all game rather than out wide. It's a lot to take in for a young player. So I do think maybe that impacted a little bit, like his numbers and everything. Still, yeah, super talent and very interesting, this whole contract situation.
Yeah, that's just a story that it's kinda like the new thing to do when you're wanna go to Europe is, "Hey, I'm not gonna resign, so you can sell me and get a fee, or and I'll leave for free in 12 months," or something like that. And we've seen Liga MX teams, I mean, including Chivas, when they did this to Chiquete. "Well, you're not gonna resign? Alright, go have fun playing with the U17s." But hopefully
But I
Chivas
mean,
sell.
I don't know what you think, what your thoughts about this are, but it kind of seems like, given the inflated prices of Mexican players, that if a player does want to go to Europe, then that's their only choice.
No, you have to force the club. You can't. One thing I have been seeing is that if a player does resign, they're having the dual release clause. Here's a release clause for a European club, which is always lower than the release clause for a Mexican club. And as long as the release clause for Europe is makes sense, that's the only way a player can protect themselves. Otherwise, you can't do this. Well, the directors promised me they would let me go if an offer came through. Is that in writing? Oh, it's not. Well, then guess what? You're not going to get sold because you're right. You have to pretty much force management's hand to let them know, hey, I'm going to leave on a free contract.
Yeah, and players have to understand that at the end of the day, clubs have to operate in their own interests, right? And so they they're not going to let, just out of the sort of goodness of their heart, let people go for what they see as undervalued fees. But we have a market mismatch. It's basically the situation, right? Where Mexico, the valuation of players within Mexico, of Mexican players, but actually sometimes of foreign players who are within the league, is a lot higher than the valuation in the rest of the world. I mean, maybe occasionally there might be an MLS club who's willing to pay a significant fee, the sort of fee that Liga MX clubs are looking for, but like most teams in Europe are not going to be willing to take that fee because of the risks that they see of signing a player from the league, because of the fact that there's other markets they can go to, right? They can get similar talents from a league where, maybe from Colombia or Argentina, where maybe the prices are a lot lower. Players have to understand that clubs are going to make the decisions in their best interest, and they have to also make decisions in their own best interest. The tough thing, obviously, is you're weighing up short term and long term, right? Like, if that contract's there on the table for you to sign right now, it's very tempting. Yeah, sometimes if a player really believes in themselves, they have to kind of bet on themselves to say, maybe in the short term I might not make as much, but in the long term I'm going to end up having more success and making more money.
And that's why I always give props to these Mexican players abroad who they could easily come to Liga MX, double, triple their salary. I mean, I always heard stories like Ronaldo saying he could 4x his salary if he would have left PSV earlier to go to Liga MX, or I think Atlanta United was chasing him for a couple windows when they were an expansion club. So always give respect to these guys. I mean, Guillermo Ochoa, you can't tell me that man would not be making more money in an MLS club than what he's making right now, the bottom rung of Portugal, basically. You know?
Yeah, no, there's always going to be these opportunities. I mean, we know that Tigres in particular have had a recruitment strategy in recent years where they've basically just kept tabs on all the Mexicans that have gone off to Europe and have tried to be the first, the first offer for them to come back to Mexico. And a lot of that is just because it's easy for them to sign them, right? Like they have Liners now, right? They would never have been able to sign Liners off America.
No, no.
But Linus goes to Europe and then he can come back
Yeah.
and join Tigres.
And with the Pacta Caballeros allegedly over, he can sign with Tigres. I'm not sure if that would have been so easy 10 years ago, where America would have wanted something for that, even though obviously they had sold him already. But that's neither here nor there. Mateo Chavez, assuming he's going to the Eredivisie, you like the move?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think, well, first of all, we've seen Eredivisie's been a great league in the past for Mexican players to go to and been a good stepping stone in terms of, a great thing about the Eredivisie is you play some games against teams that are worse than the bottom of Liga MX, to be honest. So you get some of those easier games, but then you also get the challenge of some very, very competitive games against the big teams in the league, plus European football. I mean, RZ have been a team that normally been kind of Europa League or Conference League in the last few seasons. So, and they're also a fantastic club. Like they're
A
definitely one of
selling
the
club.
best. Yeah, well, they're a developing club. They're one of the best clubs in Europe. Developing their own talent, but also bringing in guys for cheap, turning them into much better players, or at least maybe not necessarily like it's not always literally developing them so much, but sometimes it's just giving them a platform, right? Like finding a player who's maybe in a league that isn't so watched, and then you put them in a league that people are following more. We know that lots of clubs around Europe are watching Eredivisie and pay decent fees for them, so they give them that platform to play in the Eredivisie. They stand out, they get sold for a big profit. So for me, without doubt, one of the best clubs to go to. Like I think they're one of the most interesting, innovative clubs. There's a lot of stuff I've read about them in the past. So a great move. Yeah, if it goes ahead, I think it'll be a great move for him.
Yeah, Eredivisie clubs, they want to bring you in, get you into their system, into their training, into their nutrition. 18 months, all right, out the door for 3, 4x their money. There was a
Absolutely.
great article on Santi Jimenez when he was there last year in The Athletic, and they were talking to the sports science people, talking about how they had to change how Santi ran because he ran in a way that wasn't efficient and could hurt him, I think was their logic.
Mhm.
Because a lot of people don't realize the first 6 months he was there, he didn't play as much. He was a super sub, kinda changing his, system and everything, but yeah, that was the interesting thing when I read, like, we had to change how he ran, which
Yeah,
is just
I
crazy.
read that article as well. Really, really interesting. Yeah, and I think they did like control or limit his minutes literally just because they're like, okay, this is a huge asset we've got on our hands. We need to protect him. We can't have him getting injured. Let's ease him in. Let's adapt his running style to make it more efficient and less likely of getting injuries. And then after that, he was obviously their star player for a year or so.
And kind of in going in line with that, Chivas is keeping 30% of his rights of Mateo Chavez, and I think the fee is like 1.7 to $2 million. And Cruz Azul, I think they sold Santi for $3 to $4 million, but after everything was all said and done, I think they made around $11 million or 10 to $12 million after the sell-on fees and all that stuff after his move to AC Milan. So I've been preaching this for a while. Sell your players and keep a nice fee. You're selling him to a club that's going to get sold. They're not going to keep Mateo Chavez for 6, 7 years. They're gonna
Exactly.
18 months, 24 months, sell him. That is their model, so
Exactly.
I like the
It's
move.
again, it's the short term, long term question, right? Like, do you take the money now, or do you think actually, if I take a little bit less now, maybe as you say, if I hold on to a percentage of this player, we could end up winning a lot more in the long term. Obviously, we know sometimes clubs in Mexico don't think like that, right? They don't always think about anything further ahead than the next 6 months, the next tournament that's coming up. Yeah, I think it can be a very wise decision for clubs to make.
Camberos, Mateo Chavez, national team profile. Do you see them, any of them breaking through player pool? It might be easier for Chavez at right back. Do you see any of them? Well, Gold Cup, let's assume Chavez goes to Alkmaar. Do you think it'd be good for him to play in the Gold Cup or to go with this preseason?
Get a preseason.
Yes,
Get a
100% agree. I
preseason.
remember when Mexico had all the European players like 10, 12 years ago. I swear to God, none of them ever had a full preseason with their club because they all had to play the fucking Gold Cup every 12 months, every summer. It's a Gold Cup, Gold Cup.
With their bizarre scheduling of playing games in July rather than June. Yeah, it's. I think this year it might actually be a bit earlier, which is good because I used to be like the Gold Cup would end and then the Premier League would start like a week later or something like
Yeah, it's a couple weeks later. Yeah, um, the Club World Cup and the Gold Cup kick off within 24 hours of each other.
that. Right. Oh, because they're doing the East-West coast
Yeah,
thing.
it's
Okay. Well, the Mexican players won't be the only ones who are going to be exhausted this summer then.
yeah, yeah,
That's a positive. No, I think on national team prospects, I think Camberos is probably a little bit away, a few years away of making it. I certainly think there's an opportunity because it's not like there's tons of wingers around. Um, Mexico's compared to a few years ago is lacking, I think, in talent in wide areas. But yeah, Chavez at left back, why not? Like if he does make a move to Europe, I'm I'm not convinced that like Vasco would make this decision because I feel like Vasco's a bit more, he likes a bit more experience. Obviously, he's still been sticking with Gallardo, who, physically will he still be at his peak come the next World Cup? I think that's a fair question to ask. And but yeah, there's competition for left back spots, and Chavez is for me in the conversation, or should be at least in the conversation, considering what we've seen from him in Liga MX. I mean, he's someone who, as you said, second in tackles won. So defensively, he's super aggressive and a very good ball winner. But he's also someone who is very good going forward and um, gets frequently gets into the final third and creates opportunities. I think he's someone who certainly should be considered.
and can, Mateo Chavez, do you think he'd be good at as a wingback? Because the way Vasco is playing, we might be need more wingbacks than we had before.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he's like I said, he's someone who can often get forward and create opportunities. He's one of those fullbacks who gives you both like up and down. And considering Gallardo's age, I do think there's the question of can he give you that same level of energy that we would have seen from Gallardo years ago? I mean, I think in those Nations League games, like one thing I noticed was Mexico barely created anything from the left. It kind of all came from the right side. And part of that was tactics, but part of that was like Gallardo was not getting always into those overlapping positions that maybe he would have done a few years ago.
And again, it's these tournaments are a sprint. Like you can't rely on being one deep at a position. Gallardo gets a couple yellow cards and boom, he's out. He's missing the third game, the third group game, and that's always been Mexico's problem. I think Mexico, for the most part, the last 20 years, 1 through 12, 1 through 13, they can compete with most teams in the world. I would say compete.
Yes.
They're not going to beat anyone, but players 14 through 24, 25, whatever the roster is, that's where the drop off is for Mexico. So building depth is crucial for these tournaments.
I think that is a fair point, and I think it's sometimes underrated how because like those major tournaments are like as you say, it's a sprint, right? It's a super sped up version of a season. So maybe in a normal season, we're used to like, oh, this player in this position gets like 3, 4 games, and maybe they're not playing so well, so then they get dropped. Major tournaments, like if one player has a bad game, like that's it. Like the change happens instantly.
Yeah.
Instantly they'll change for the next game because there's no time to waste. So yeah, you do need that depth.
All right. Finishing off with these young Mexicans to watch here. Call it the Cholos three-peat. Ramiro Arciga, 20 years old, 1,400 minutes, 3 assists. Efrain Alvarez, still only 22 somehow.
Somehow.
It's 2,500 minutes this season, 5 goals, 6 assists. And then, according to Transfer Market, who has him as the second most valuable person born in 2008, Gilberto Mora, the Mexican jewel. Pick one of those players to talk about. Let me know your thoughts on these guys. I'm high on Mora and Alvarez. Arciga, not as much. I haven't really watched him, I guess, as much as Mora and Alvarez, but let me know what you think of these three guys.
Okay, well, quickly on Arciga, I'm very high on him. I actually think he's really good. He actually got a hat trick of assists against Santos in Jornada 17. So that's
Does
a
that count though against Santos this year?
fair enough. I mean, yeah, still, yeah, really good player. I actually thought he for Mazatlan last year in Apertura, he was their standout attacking player. I think the move to Xolos unfortunately kind of maybe didn't make too much sense just because he plays on the right. So him and Efrain end up playing in the same position. Obviously, it's very difficult to take Efrain Alvarez's spot, who's obviously been one of Xolos' best players for a few seasons now. So yeah, maybe not the best move in that sense, but if Efrain moves on, then Arciga's there to take that place. So I think it's definitely someone to watch going forward and a very creative and wide player. Alvarez himself, yeah, obviously has been around for a very, very long time for such a young player, got a huge amount of minutes. I think someone who, yeah, perhaps isn't going to be able to make that step up to that very top level that might have been hoped for when he was starring for LA Galaxy as a teenager. Maybe not someone who's going to go to Europe, but I think he could be a top player within Liga MX for the next few years. Obviously, he's still got some of his best years ahead of him. Left-footed player plays on the right. Is very mainly a creative player rather than a goal scorer, but I think he's very good at getting in accurate crosses. Something I really like about him, which I put in my article, is how he's so effective at quickly getting the cross in. So he's not someone that needs like a lot of space. He's not someone that needs to necessarily go all
He's
the way
very
around the
shifty.
defender.
He's not fast, but he's
Shifty.
shifty. Yeah.
That's the word. That is the word. He's very shifty. He's one of those players who can he can stop, he can freeze the defender, like freeze on the ball, and then all he needs is like one little shift to one side, and he's got the angle, and all he needs is that little bit of a gap, that little angle, and he'll bend the ball in with his left foot, looking for the far post normally. So I really like that about him, and I think in the right team, like he could be definitely one of the best players in Liga MX, and still had a very good season with Xolos. Like even though it was a disappointing campaign for Xolos, he was still very effective. And then yeah, Mora, as you say, like it's very hard not to get excited. Obviously, we've seen some teenagers before who maybe haven't gone on to kick on in their career, but yeah, Mora playing as like 15, 16-year-old and not just playing, but actually being very good, like being a standout player in some matches is extraordinary. It really is.
There's this article. There's this documentary on Ajax's I think YouTube channel. The documentary is called "Scouting for the Future," and they talk about him. You can see on their screen, they're like looking at a screen, and if you freeze it, and you can zoom in on the screen. They're talking about Gilberto Mora. They're like, "Oh, we've been scouting him since he was 15 years old."
Yeah. So a
So
lot of guys, I mean, a lot of teams are going to be keeping an eye on him. He's probably, honestly, he's going to be like on the list, whatever list they have, but he's going to be on
was it
a
the
list.
NXG list or the NGN list of the next 50 best players or something like that?
And every single club, like honestly, like almost every club in Europe, if they have any sort of process where they look at young players around the world, he is going to make it. In fact, a lot of clubs these days have like algorithms that do it for them. So a lot of clubs literally have systems where they'll be like tracking games around the world, and if a they'll put in a limit of like, okay, if a guy who's under 18 reaches, I don't know, 500 minutes or 1,000 minutes or whatever it is, then instantly they're going on the list, right? Because there's so few of those guys in any top division in any part of the world. So yeah, he would have automatically, just by playing minutes, instantly been on some lists. He's someone I've actually looked at since he was, I guess, probably a couple of years ago. So one thing that we did and we built at Santos was some ways of scouting the academy levels, like the Fuerzas Básicas in Liga MX, so that we had an idea of the players who are coming through. And so in Liga MX, we have a company called GoalStats who offer data for Fuerzas Básicas games, and it's pretty basic, right? You're not going to get like advanced models and like expected goals and all this stuff, but you get some basic data on these players. And so I built some some models and things like that where I was using it to try to find out, who are the best players historically, who are the best players now, like, and using that to try to understand who has the best chance of making it in Liga MX. And basically, within his position, within his role, he was in the under 16s league, the best player I'd seen ever, right? So yeah, he instantly stood out as someone I was like, okay, according to the analysis, the algorithms I've got, like this guy has a very good chance of making it to Liga MX. But I can't say I expected him to make it already. I thought it would be a process of okay, he's going to step up to the next level and the next level, and maybe by the time he's like 18, 19, he could be playing Liga MX. Yeah, Osorio threw him in there, and he, yeah, did an incredible job.
How much of this is just like obviously he's talented, but how much of it has to do with Osorio also saying, "You know what? Let's try this. Let's just see this kid play." Because you're right, he could have been stuck in the reserves or whatever, the lower leagues for 3 more years. He still would have only been 18 when he made it because he made his debut as 15. No one would have said anything, and I feel like Osorio was just kinda like, "Let's throw him out there. Let's see what happens."
Absolutely. Like you have to give massive credit to him for doing that, and some of the sort of stuff that like La Volpe's done in the past, obviously, by having the confidence in these players, because it's so easy to be like, even for me, right? Like where I've built these models, right? I have a model that can give me confidence. It can say, like, you know what, based on this player's performances at this level and based on the history, like I think he can make first team. But even so, to take that and to take what you're seeing with your eyes, to then have the confidence to be like, put him into a game when it's a coach, right? Their job's constantly on the line. That is very difficult. Absolutely, massive credit to do that, but also to see him. I'm really interested to know how that worked internally, because what normally happens within clubs is like maybe the coaching staff, maybe not the head coach himself, but like assistants will watch the under 23s play, right? They might watch the under 19s play as well to keep an eye on players that are coming through, and they might pick out the standouts. They might call them up to train with the first team, and things like that to get a closer eye on them. And then maybe if they stand out, they throw them into the first team squad. But Mora came from the under 16s to the first team. So obviously, like what we know about Osorio is how much research he does. Like, there's a lot about how dedicated he is in terms of watching video and planning games, and a coach that works incredibly hard, and clearly that extended to watching his own academy teams. Because I could say for sure there would be some coaches in Liga MX that wouldn't have even known about that guy, or wouldn't have been even seen them, because they just wouldn't have paid attention to the under 16s, because it would have been like so far off in the future that it just wouldn't have made sense for them to look at, which you can understand, right? If most coaches last less than a year, like, I mean, why are you going to watch 15-year-olds play? Well, that's not in your interest at all. So I'm interested to see. Would be interested to know how that works behind the scenes. But yeah, credit for playing him, but also for finding him, and like,
Yeah, and, in your article, you talk about how, in the U16 category, he's defined as a striker for the stats by goal stats, and you said that he in your article, you said he ranks as the best player in that role, in that category since goal stats began covering the academies, Liga MX Academy in 2018. And then you also said the second ranked player is Ramiro Arciga.
yes, absolutely. Maybe they stole my model.
Maybe. Do you know? I don't think I saw a fee for Ramiro Arciga leaving Mazatlan.
I don't know, to be honest.
I didn't see a fee like discussed or anything like that. So that seems kind of almost negligent for Mazatlan to let him go on a free. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
we could get sidetracked into me complaining about Mazatlan's winter transfer window, but I mean, it was a disaster.
And where do you see? Well, I guess as a national team profile too, but where do you think is Mora's best position as a second striker, as someone on the wing, as a number 10?
I think this is the really interesting thing going forward. Like, how do you, like, what do you do with him, right? You've got this incredibly talented player who's got so much about him at such a young age, but what do you focus on? And a lot of how a lot of coaches will think about it is, what can I add to this player's game? That's often what they like to think about it. So, like, you don't want to change them because they're already doing so well, right? But you want to take them to the next level by adding something. So I honestly don't know. Like, I'm not sure where this guy is going to play in the future. I think probably like playing off the left would be the easiest position for him to play in, just because, like we've said before, like how many teams actually play with a number 10 or a second striker? Like that could be tough for him to get into. He's too small to play as a number 9 on his own, right? He's not going to play up front on his own.
Is he
Maybe if a team want like a false 9 system, like maybe,
is he
but I
Gio
don't
dos
think that's
Santos
going to happen.
2.0?
Different player, I think.
Yeah, I know. Just
Different player. But
that's just
I
crazy.
think probably coming in off the left would make more sense to hit for him. But yeah, what's he going to add to his game? What I put in the article, for me, the easiest thing is to try to just get him more frequently into goal scoring positions and to try to be more of a frequent goal scorer, pretty much. Because partly because, as I've said before, like passing is something that tends to improve as players get a little bit older. So I think maybe that creativity might come in the future, but also because he's such a great ball carrying, such a great dribbler, like he can himself get himself into those dangerous shooting positions, right? Like he can beat a player and get a shot off. So that's probably what I'd focus on. But we'll see, right? Like, who knows? He's someone who I think could be used in so many different ways and has been, right? We've even seen him play like more of a deeper midfielder sometimes under Osorio.
And he can't leave Cholos until the 2027 winter transfer window because he just turned 16 in October. I mean, he can be sold and, sold and then he'll move when he's 18, but he can't leave Cholos or Mexico, better yet, until he's 18, which happens in October of 2026. So he can't leave until January 2027. He's so young.
Yeah, like he's got a lot of time still in Cholos, and my assumption is that there will be a deal done for him soon. No, normally Chelsea or Brighton tend to snap up these players.
Does Cholos have any relationship with any European clubs? Even one of those fake partnerships?
Honestly, not that I know of.
I don't think
Not
so
that I
either.
know of. They might do, but I'm not sure.
At least Chivas has had one with like PSV and stuff in the past. I don't know if it's still ongoing. I don't even sure. I'm not even sure if anything came of it, but like something like a partnership that FC Dallas and MLS has with Bayern Munich, that's really paid off for them where they send players every winter to train and even had players go from FC Dallas to Bayern. I think it'd be cool if a club in Europe actually did one of those with a Liga MX club and actually did something with it other than here's a friendly every 4 years or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Is it PSV now have one with Pachuca?
I think so. I think it was
That might be
recently
right.
announced, no?
Yeah, yeah, I think that might be right. But yeah, these are really these partnerships. I definitely think is something that, yeah, teams can use as like a mutually beneficial thing. I also know that, like for example, I know MLS have a deal with French football where they send a lot of their coaches to do the coaching courses in France, and I think, yeah, Mexican football could massively benefit if some coaches from over here could go and get some experience or do some courses, some training, just even like be on a training ground and watch some guys coach out in Europe. I think that would be extremely valuable because the standard of coaching courses here is not up to scratch.
Ramiro Arciga, Efrain Alvarez, Gilberto Mora. Any of them make the 2026 World Cup roster?
Well, Alvarez was called up last for the Nations League. I think
He didn't see any minutes though,
he didn't
I
see
don't
any
think.
minutes, but I wouldn't be surprised if he made. Yeah, I don't think he got on the pitch, but I wouldn't be surprised if he made it. Just because, like I put in the article, he's very unique because he's a left footer who plays on the right, and a lot of coaches like that. A lot of coaches want that. There's very few of them around. Piojo Alvarado played in both games. He did a very good job for the national team, but I think we can question whether, considering his performances for Chivas over the last few years, if he's should be a national team player. But he keeps getting these opportunities, and I think part of it is just because if you want a left footer on the right, there's very limited options. So I wouldn't be surprised if Efrain made it simply as, this guy can be the backup to Piojo.
My favorite Efrain Alvarez story is I don't know if you've seen it online. It's been on TikTok a bunch, but Vasco basically saying he didn't want Alvarez on the team. He thought he looked out of shape and pudgy, but he brought him along to the Brazil and the River Plate game in January. and he liked him, and obviously he liked him enough to call him up to the Nations League. But I just think that's hilarious because it's classic Vasco. Like I don't care anymore. Like I'm just gonna say what I want to say. And yeah,
I mean, classic Mexican football as well, right? These are like stories you'd hear in other countries maybe 10, 20 years ago, but
he just
still
said it in an
happening here.
interview. He's just like, hey, oh Alvarez, yeah, I didn't like him at first. They're a little pudgy, but you know, I like him now. He also said the story about how he didn't like Chino Huerta. He didn't like him until one time they were playing a friendly or something, and Chino Huerta and him got into it, yelling at each other, and now they're friends.
Wow. Okay. Again, would be a major side note, but some of the like quick assumptions that coaches can come to on players and just like instantly decide that they don't like them is just ridiculous sometimes.
And that's why it's important to have people around you that give you the information you need, as opposed to just, "Well, yeah, whatever you say, coach." You need like people on on your coaching staff to kind of challenge you. I feel like from the sounds of it,
Absolutely.
it sounds like Vasco has at least people on there who've maybe been with him for a while that can say, "Hey, you should really take a look at this guy," or "Hey, we should try this," which is nice.
Absolutely. Incredibly important for coaches to have that. That is true.
So is Gilberto Mora gonna is he the new Lioness, basically? Teenager
Hopefully
who
better.
teenager
Hopefully
who
better.
fans and want to be on the national team as soon as possible, but then, actually, a
Yeah,
quick question, is Lioness gonna be on the national team this summer? Gold Cup?
I don't think so. I don't
No?
think so. No, I don't see it.
What about any of those Tigres players? Oziel Herrera, Marcelo Flores, Lioness?
Probably, probably none, to be honest.
None? Wow.
Yeah. If anyone, maybe Marcelo. I really like Osiel Herrera, but he just keeps getting injured.
I liked him, and then he signed with, Tigres, and now it's kinda
Yeah,
like he's a rotation player.
yeah.
He's good, but he's a
They really
rotation player. They
stocked
have
up
so many
on young
options.
Mexican wingers for some reason.
I mean, they still got Javier Aquino still kicking, bro. That guy is still chugging along.
Honestly, Aquino, why hasn't he been in the national team conversation for however many years? I mean, is there
I
a better
don't know.
fullback? Is there a better Mexican fullback?
I don't know. And he just kept going backwards as he got older, as most people do. He kept dropping deeper, deeper. I mean, can he play fullback on a team that doesn't possess the ball a lot?
No, probably not. That's a fair point. That's a
You know what
fair
I mean?
point. Yeah.
It's kinda like when a player plays fullback at Barcelona, it's like, is he really playing fullback or is he just playing a winger just a couple steps back? 90% of the time, Barcelona's gonna have the ball 60% of the possession, you know?
Plus height.
Yeah.
Everyone, people want tall fullbacks nowadays. I think that's why Gallardo's played so many minutes. One reason why Gallardo's played so many minutes for the national team.
Yeah, I've been a Gallardo hater. He played well in the window, this past window. Can you do it every 3 games like we were talking about? We need another one. Arteaga, maybe? I don't know. He hasn't impressed me at Monterrey. Just not a lot of options. That's why when we were talking about, Mateo Chavez, I was like, "Why not at this point?"
Yeah, yeah. I think the other one perhaps is another Pachuca player, Brian Gonzalez, could be
Yes.
someone
Yes.
who's interesting to watch. Another guy who's got decent height, which might make him a more interesting national team option. But yeah, someone who's been really good for the past few years.
Is there any other U23 player you wanna highlight in this podcast?
Any other U23? But can I think of any other U23 player? We've been through a lot by now.
Options are limited in Liga MX. That's why I thought this was a good discussion for for the podcast. I'm like, there can't be that many options.
It is absolutely, and then with those Tigres ones, I think you've mentioned some of the other. Obviously, Marcelo Flores is, I think, still a very interesting, talented player who could still be a national team player in the future. Yeah. Apart from that, who else interests me? I like Denzel Garcia at Juarez, who's a midfielder who's moved into a like modern right back role this season, where he's been playing as a right back when they've been defending, but he's played as a central midfielder when Juarez had the ball, and he's someone who's came through Juarez a long time ago. He's had quite a lot of minutes now for a young player, and yeah, I think he's a pretty talented player. Not necessarily saying he's going to be national team, but I think he's going to be around Liga MX for a lot of years, and he has a cool name. So
It always helps. Last, real quick before I let you go, Ligia predictions. Who's in your final 4?
the final four, this is when you know when you're making these predictions, you don't just want to be boring and say the teams who finished higher in the table,
Top
but
4?
then you think
Hey,
that's
one of them
probably
is
going to happen.
Cruz Azul is number 3. Are you saying they're gonna make it to semifinals, or they're gonna they're gonna do Cruz Azul things and lose against Leon in the first round?
That would be Cruz Azul things.
Yeah,
No, I think they'll probably get through that tie. Yeah, I fancy Tigres against Necaxa. To be honest, Necaxa, have, you know, been very fun to watch this season, but they've coming off basically a massive overperformance in terms of their results versus their underlying numbers. So the likelihood and the prediction would be that they'd lose that. Maybe the most interesting one actually could be America facing against whoever win against Monterrey and Pachuca. I think that might be the hardest one to call, considering America have struggled a little bit. I think especially in those bigger games against Monterrey, against Cruz Azul, adapting to life kind of without Henry Martin, trying to now use Fidalgo and Eric Sanchez as the main goal scorers. Also, they've become very reliant, I think, on Brian Rodriguez on the left wing to make things happen. And like we saw when he went off injured, that the attack really didn't work. So I think that one could be interesting. Toluca would be expected to, blow away anyone, whoever else they're going to face. But yeah, maybe if they do come up against a Pachuca or Monterrey, actually, that's not so easy, especially if it is Pachuca, because Pachuca defensively are very good. So yeah, Toluca's attack might not be able to, dominate as we've seen this season.
yeah, the Lucas attack has just been kinda crazy to watch. We haven't really talked about him, but what a fucking season by Alexis Vega. What a bounce back year for him.
Unbelievable. I mean, yeah, definitely one of the best seasons I've ever seen of any player in Mexico, let alone a Mexican player. Like I said, the shame with him is he didn't score in the last 4 games, and he only got 1 assist. So his numbers are still ridiculous. I think it's 17 goals and assists, but he only added one in the last 4 matches. It could have been over 20 if he'd have kept it.
Yeah, I don't know, he's one of those players where I was hyped when he was on the national team a couple years ago, and he's just never just maybe it was just the team was just bad all around, the national team, but I don't know, he didn't do anything for the national team. He couldn't lift it up, at lea I'll say this, he couldn't lift up whatever we had.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the step up to national team football is always tough, right? But also, yeah, I mean, some of those World Cup games, like Mexico was so defensive that often it was like give the ball to Vega and hope he beats 3 players and scores from 30 yards. And it's like, you give him some help, right? And like, I mean, that's the great thing about this Toluca team. He's got guys to connect with, right? He's got talent all around him that he can play off.
It just I think he'll get another chance with the national team. He'll get some run just because we don't have many options on the wing. So he'll get another shot. I hope he does well with it because we are short attacking midfielders. It is rough out there for Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably, I guess, got that spot on the left side just about at the moment. Some competition there, but I'd say he's probably the first choice right now.
Yeah. And as far as Liga predictions for me, Club America, they're gonna win.
Again,
Somehow,
again.
due to some penalties or whatever, you know how it is, some VAR shenanigans.
No, I'm going to say this, that my prediction is at least that this year is not going to be America. I will probably be proven wrong, but there you go.
I'm curious to see if they make it into the Club World Cup. It's gonna
That's
be
me.
them and LAFC allegedly if the Leons, I don't know, their court case doesn't go their way.
The case with Cass.
Yeah,
If it's
which
not Alajuelense, right? I mean, that's
dude, it was I heard Alajuelense, Club America, LAFC, and I think maybe Columbus Crew were like, these are one of the 4 clubs that make sense depending on which metric you look at, which
I mean, Infantino did come out and say he would like a playoff between. Exactly,
yeah, a
exactly.
playoff in SoCal? Yeah, I'm sure FIFA would love that.
Yeah, let's make this tournament even longer.
Dude, it's gonna be brutal.
Could
Up
have just
here
boosted it to 40 odd teams, right? Right off the bat. I mean, throw in Leon as well, throw in some other teams.
dude, there's been a couple episodes ago, I had, Walter Franco, we were talking about business stuff, and they were FIFA is struggling to fill these seats for these games. They're even tying the ability to get games for the World Cup. if you
Yes,
buy
I
a
saw that.
package, but someone read the fine print and you don't get to pick which game in the World Cup you get. So you can get some really crappy game if you buy like all 3 of Chelsea's group stage games this summer or something. It's some
Or like
shady
on
stuff.
the other side of the country where you can't
Yeah.
get to or something.
So it's not like you get first dibs. It's like, "Oh, you'll get a ticket, but we won't tell you what game." It's just classic FIFA shenanigans, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they struggled to sell the TV rights for a while as well,
That's a whole
and then
'nother thing,
Inter
yeah.
Miami somehow, made it in, and then suddenly the interest spiked a little bit.
Didn't spike. It was the Zone won the rights for it, $1 billion. At the same time, the Zone is also getting investment from someone in Saudi for $1 billion. It's a whole conspiracy thing, dude. It is wild.
There you go.
Well, Tom, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Definitely gonna ask you to come back again. Where can the people find you nowadays? Where are you at?
Yeah, well, my newsletter, which I'm writing, which is sometimes about young players, sometimes I mean lots of different topics, teams, trends, general things, anything I find interesting within the numbers within Mexican football, pretty much. So that's Cambio de Juego, or basically I write in Spanish and English, right? So there's Cambio de Juego and there's Cambio de Juego in English. So whatever your preference, that's available. And yeah, I'm still on Twitter/X at TomH_36. And I'm also on Blue Sky now, which I think is the same. So yeah, either of those two.
And you got a podcast now, right?
Yeah, an occasional podcast. I haven't being able to keep up as consistently as this season, but hopefully we'll have some more out in the next few weeks as we go into Liga and maybe international team in summer.
Well, there won't be a shortage of games. We got the Gold Cup, we got the Club World Cup, we got a 10-day transfer window coming up. We got the arbitration of sport trying to decide if Leon's gonna get in. It should be a nice couple months of a lot of
Got the Leagues
football.
Cup. Don't forget about that.
Uh, the League's Cup, man. That's yeah.
If it can happen in America, there's going to be a football match, right? Like I don't know who's playing, but somewhere in America at some point this summer, yeah, there's going to be a football match.
Yeah. Well, we know where to find you, Tom. Thanks for joining and thanks for listening. Later.